Cristiano Ronaldo, a name synonymous with greatness. With lightning speed and unmatched skill, he dominated the world of football. His trophy cabinet gleamed with accolades, his bank account overflowed. Fans adored him. He was living the dream, but even gods have their sanctuaries. For Ronaldo, it was his home, a luxurious villa nestled in the hills of Turin, a fortress of privacy and peace. Here he shed the mantle of stardom. He was simply Cristiano, a father, a partner, a man seeking solace. He believed he had found it. He was wrong. The night started like any other. The Turin sky glittered. A gentle breeze whispered through the cypress trees. Inside, the Ronaldo family was settling down. Laughter echoed from the children's wing. The aroma of dinner lingered in the air. An ordinary night. Or so they thought. Unbeknownst to them, danger lurked in the shadows. A figure crept closer, his eyes fixed on the brightly lit mansion. The night, so tranquil just moments ago, held its breath. The intruder wasn't a seasoned criminal. He wasn't someone who had spent years perfecting the art of breaking and entering. No, he was far from it. No hardened heartbeat beneath his ragged clothes. His eyes, though weary, still held a glimmer of hope, a spark of humanity that hadn't been extinguished by the harshness of life. He was just a man driven to desperation. A man who had seen better days, who had once walked with his head held high, but now found himself at the mercy of circumstances beyond his control. His name was Marco, and he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Each step he took was heavy with the burden of his family's plight, a plight that seemed to have no end in sight. His family, once vibrant, was now drowning in debt. Eviction loomed like a dark cloud over their heads, threatening to take away the little they had left. The laughter that once filled their home had been replaced by silence and worry. His daughter Sophia was sick. Her illness was a cruel twist of fate, a challenge that no parent should have to face. The medical bills piled up, adding to the already insurmountable debt. Marco had heard the whispers of a man who could change his fortune, a man whose generosity was the stuff of legends. Rumors of Ronaldo's legendary generosity, stories of how the football star had helped countless people in need, how his heart was as big as his fame, tales of extravagant parties and lavish gifts. Marco had heard them all, and each story added a little more fuel to the fire of hope burning within him. A glimmer of hope ignited in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, this football god could be his salvation. Maybe Ronaldo could be the answer to his prayers. Maybe, just maybe, this football god could be his salvation. The mansion stood as a beacon of hope, a symbol of the life Marco once dreamed of for his family. He knew it was a long shot, an invasion of privacy, but what choice did he have? Desperation had driven him to the edge, and now he was willing to do whatever it took to save his family. But desperation can make a saint out of a sinner. Marco wasn't a bad man, he was just a father trying to do right by his family, trying to find a way out of the darkness that had enveloped their lives. Night fell, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. The world seemed to hold its breath as Marco made his move, slipping through the darkness like a shadow himself. Marco slipped through the darkness, his heart pounding in his chest. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound made him jump, but he pressed on, driven by the thought of his daughter. He'd seen the security cameras, the imposing walls. They were meant to keep people like him out, to protect the world of the rich and famous from the harsh realities of life. But necessity, they say, is the mother of invention. He found a way, he always did. His mind raced with plans and contingencies, each one more desperate than the last. His fingers trembled as he scaled the wall, the rough stone scraping his skin. Pain shot through his hands, but he ignored it, focusing only on the task at hand. He told himself it was for Sophia. Every scrape, every bruise was worth it if it meant she could get the treatment she needed. It was for his family. The thought of their faces, their smiles gave him the strength to keep going, to push through the fear and the pain. He clung to that thought as he finally dropped onto the other side, his body tense, his eyes scanning the shadows. The night was his ally, and he moved with the stealth of a man who had everything to lose. Inside the house, Cristiano relaxed. The evening had been perfect, filled with laughter and joy. The warmth of family and friends still lingered in the air, a comforting reminder of the simple pleasures in life. He had always cherished these moments, the rare instances when he could let his guard down and simply be himself, away from the prying eyes of the world. Dinner had been a joyous affair. The table was laden with delicious food, the aroma of freshly cooked dishes mingling with the cool night air. Conversations flowed easily, punctuated by bursts of laughter. It was a scene of pure contentment, a snapshot of happiness that Cristiano wished he could freeze in time. He'd watched his children, their laughter echoing like wind chimes. Their innocent joy was infectious, a reminder of the beauty of childhood. They chased each other around the garden, their faces lit up with pure delight. It was moments like these that made all the hard work and sacrifices worthwhile. Now, he sat on the terrace, a glass of wine warming his hand. The night was calm, the sky a canvas of twinkling stars. He took a sip, savoring the rich flavor, and let out a contented sigh. This was his sanctuary, a place where he could unwind and reflect on the day's events. The city lights twinkled below, a distant and beautiful spectacle. They seemed to dance in the darkness, a reminder of the vibrant life that continued even as he sought solitude. It was a mesmerizing sight, one that never failed to captivate him. He felt a pang of contentment. In this moment, everything felt right. The world outside might be chaotic, but here, on this terrace, he found peace. It was a rare and precious feeling, one that he cherished deeply. A flicker of movement at the edge of the lawn shattered the peace. His eyes narrowed as he tried to make out the figure in the dim light. It was an unsettling sight, one that sent a shiver down his spine. Who could it be at this hour? Cristiano straightened, his senses on high alert. Years of being in the public eye had taught him to be cautious. He knew all too well the dangers that came with fame. His mind raced as he considered the possibilities. Was it a fan, a paparazzo, or something more sinister? He wasn't a stranger to fame's downsides. The constant scrutiny, the lack of privacy, the ever-present threat of danger. It was a heavy burden to bear, one that he had learned to live with. But it never got easier. Overzealous fans, paparazzi lurking in the bushes, threats whispered in the dark. He had seen it all. The lengths to which people would go to get a piece of him were astonishing. It was a reality he had come to accept, but it still unnerved him. He'd learned to be cautious, to expect the unexpected. It was a necessary skill, one that had kept him safe over the years. He scanned the garden, his eyes searching for any sign of danger. He couldn't afford to take any chances. He rose, his hand instinctively reaching for the phone in his pocket. He needed to alert security to make sure that his family was safe. His heart pounded in his chest as he dialed the number, his eyes never leaving the shadowy figure. Security. He had to alert security. They would know what to do, they would handle the situation. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He couldn't let fear take over. He had to stay focused, but before his fingers could tap the screen, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, his face etched with desperation. His clothes were worn and dusty, a stark contrast to the opulence of Cristiano's surroundings. A man, his face etched with desperation, his clothes worn and dusty. He looked out of place, a stark reminder of the harsh realities that existed outside the bubble of Cristiano's life. The man's eyes were wide with fear, his body trembling. Not a threat, Cristiano realized, at least not in the conventional sense. This man wasn't here to harm him, he was here because he had nowhere else to go. It was a sobering thought, one that made Cristiano's heart ache with empathy. This wasn't an attacker. This was a plea for help disguised as a home invasion. The man's eyes pleaded with Cristiano, begging for understanding. It was a look that Cristiano had seen before, in the eyes of those who had nothing left to lose. Marco stood frozen, blinded by the light flooding from the house. He had come here out of desperation, driven by a need that he could no longer ignore. The sight of Cristiano, his idol, standing before him was almost too much to bear. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Everything he had imagined, all the scenarios he had played out in his mind, paled in comparison to the reality of this moment. He felt disoriented, overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. He'd pictured this encounter 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of facing Cristiano Ronaldo. The man who had inspired him, who had given him hope in his darkest moments, was now standing before him, his idol, his target, his only hope. Marco's heart pounded in his chest as he took a step forward, his eyes locked on Cristiano's. This was his chance, his moment to ask for help. He just hoped that Cristiano would understand, that he would see the desperation in his eyes and offer the help that Marco so desperately needed. Fear, raw and primal, surged through Cristiano. It wasn't the kind of fear he felt on the pitch, facing a formidable opponent. This was different, more personal, more intense, not for himself, but for his family. The thought of anything happening to them was unbearable. He had always been their protector, their shield against the world's dangers. His children were asleep upstairs, oblivious to the drama unfolding beneath their windows. The innocence of their slumber contrasted sharply with the turmoil in his heart. He had to defuse the situation, and quickly. There was no time to waste. Every second counted, and he knew that hesitation could be costly. "Who are you?" Cristiano's voice was sharp, laced with a hint of his native Portuguese accent. Marco flinched. The tension in the air was palpable, a silent battle of wills. The words he'd rehearsed, the pleas, the explanations, all evaporated. Marco's mind was a whirlwind of fear and desperation, leaving him speechless. "Please!" he stammered, his voice hoarse with fear and exhaustion. He had been running on fumes, driven by a single desperate hope. "I just need to talk to you." Cristiano's eyes narrowed. He had heard many pleas in his life, but this one felt different, tinged with a raw, unfiltered urgency. He took a step forward, his stance wary. Years of experience had taught him to be cautious, to read the signs and trust his instincts. Years at the top had honed his instincts. He could sense danger, feel the undercurrents of a situation, and react accordingly. He knew a desperate man when he saw one, and desperation could be unpredictable. It could drive people to do things they wouldn't normally consider. "Stay back," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. He needed to maintain control, to keep the situation from spiraling out of hand. But Marco took a step closer. His desperation was evident, overriding his sense of caution. "Please," he repeated, his voice cracking. "My daughter, she's sick." The words hung in the air, heavy with emotion and urgency. "I have nowhere else to turn." The plea was raw, a father's last hope to save his child. The air crackled with tension. It was a standoff, a moment where anything could happen. Cristiano hesitated, torn between caution and a flicker of sympathy that flickered in his chest. He had been in desperate situations before, but this was different. This wasn't how he'd envisioned his night, but then again, life rarely followed the script. He took a deep breath, preparing himself for what was to come. The night was far from over, and the decisions he made now would shape its outcome.